This is John Gilroy from the Federal Tech Podcast.
This is Doug Hudson from Orca Security.
Today, we're going to talk about agentless cloud security. Hit the music, Manny.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, where industry leaders share insights on innovation with a focus on reducing cost and improving security for federal technology. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Our guest today is Doug Hudson, Vice President, Public Sector at Orca Security. We're going to talk about something called agentless cloud security, but before we dive into this, I would be remiss if I didn't tell our audience, we're recording this from the floor of the 2023 AWS Summit in lovely downtown Washington, D.C. 10,000 people attending this place. This place is jammed. I walked in here this morning. People were lined up to go to the education sessions. I mean, this is quite a conference, isn't it, Doug?
It's pretty amazing that we can have this many people that are interested in AWS, and it's really a attribute to Amazon, just how many people they're impacting.
You know, if you look at the history of Amazon, we can draw a little graph and see, you know, in the last 10, 15 years, we've had a little small little graph, maybe a little hockey stick. But your company, you kind of define the hockey stick, don't you? So 3 or 4 years, you're blowing up.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, you know, from when we launched at, funny enough, AWS reInvent in Las Vegas,
really?
Roughly 4 years ago, to where we're at now, you know, being what we're at, and with the support, obviously, of AWS, but also of other industry. It's been a wild ride.
I'm such an old guy. I remember James Bond. I remember in the 1960s they had all these little TV shows with secret agents, and there's one called Secret Agent Man.
Secret Agent Man, Secret Agent Man.
Secret Agent Man. What's it got to do with AWS and computing and security? So what is agentless cloud security?
So traditionally in security, and specifically cloud security, the model has been broken. And what I mean by that, or what that means, is traditional security is point-time solution. So you need to install an agent, you need to install a sidecar, you need to install some sort of software or appliance within the environment. Our founders decided that this model was broken. It doesn't scale with the cloud. It doesn't work with hyperscalers. So what we're able to do at Orca is leverage cloud technology to be able to inspect everything that's going on within a single cloud or multi-cloud ecosystem, all the way down to the container, serverless, and function solutions within that ecosystem. Present that in a way to the practitioner or to the CISO that says, hey, these are the things that are wrong. We contextualize it so they're not playing whack-a-mole with 10,000 or 15,000 vulnerabilities. It becomes very, very practitioner-friendly. It is a different way, and we talk a lot about frictionless. You now don't have the opportunity to go install those agents, those sidecars. You don't have to manage those licenses. So from a business operations perspective, it's much more seamless, much easier to go and say, hey, this is what my security looks like in this cloud or that cloud.
I went to YouTube this morning and typed in your company name, and I watched an interview with this guy named Avi. Whew. It's pretty sharp. And he used a phrase I've never heard before, side scanning. So what the heck's that? What's side scanning?
So you had mentioned the Secret Agent Man or Agentless. What side scanning is the ability to leverage the cloud technology. And to get a little more specific, what we're doing at Orca is we're taking a snapshot of everything that's associated with that cloud ecosystem, single cloud or multi-cloud. We're pulling that into the side, if you will, hence side scanning. But we're pulling that off to the side, and that's where we do the deep inspection. So we mentioned frictionless. We address side scanning. What that means is now, rather than having that impact on the internal environment, when we think about the impact to the environment, right? Typically, there's when you're talking agents and other things that are being installed, there's impact to compute, there's impact to storage, there's impact to systems. Being able to pull this in using side scanning reduces or eliminates all impact to production and non-production environments, because that deep inspection that we use via our patented side scanning technology removes that impact to the environment, so the environment can continue to operate in a more secure fashion without any impact of scanning and assessment and a deep inspection that we do.
Well, I'm responsible for maintaining a couple of cars, and I always use synthetic oil because it's frictionless. It's a little bit better than the regular oil. And when I learned about frictionless with your company, I thought about, it might be. Then I listened to Avi, and he said, give us 30 minutes, and we'll scan your whole system. I was like, okay, now, am I going to get you in trouble if you say that's crazy? It seems pretty fast. I mean, it seems pretty frictionless, doesn't it?
It's honestly, Avi's a genius, right? On a lot of different ways. But more specifically, because of the way that our technology works and pulling it into a side environment to be able to scan allows us to deliver those results very, very quickly. It takes typically 5 minutes or less to onboard onto Orca, and we're actually able to then go and within minutes to hours provide you deep visibility into all those things that are going on within your cloud, again, single or multi-cloud ecosystem.
My next interview is going to be with a software company to talk about continuous development. Okay, continuous development. We see this a lot in the federal government everywhere. And one of the dirty little secrets is that there could be misconfigurations along the way when you are continuously improving or changing things. And unbeknownst to you, you can get in trouble. So this is one of the strengths of your product, isn't it?
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. One of the really nice things is we're not just looking at those standard common vulnerabilities that everybody's familiar with. We're looking at different misconfiguration items, whether they're associated with VPCs, whether they're associated with containers, whether they're associated with identity. But specifically when you start talking about the CI/CD pipeline and continuous development, we're looking at those code repositories that are coming into production to identify, are there vulnerabilities, are there issues that are going to present risk to that entity that's using Orca. Again, because this is happening, essentially out of band, we're not slowing business down. We talk about frictionless. We're not slowing business down. We're not stopping development. We're allowing the business to continue to develop, to continue to progress, but providing them the optics on what's going on so that they can do so quicker and more securely.
Well, it's my son's birthday today. I remember teaching him how to drive, and I had to teach him about blind spots in your car. It happens. Bigger cars, vans, and trucks, and automobiles. And I think when you do scanning, you may see digital blind spots as well, especially in federal systems. So it seems like a tool like yours, although it's frictionless, it also is thorough enough to see blind spots. Is that right?
Absolutely. Going back to cloud security kind of generally being broken with point solutions, because we don't deploy agents, because we're leveraging the native cloud technology to get the information within that cloud ecosystem, we're able to look essentially at all that metadata. We're able to do it out of band again so that there's little to no impact on the client environment, but we're able to do deep inspection. So where traditional scanners, where traditional agents, where traditional sidecars are missing things within the environment, we're collecting all that and we're able to inspect. That's why as we continue to grow as an organization, we continue to develop new use cases of how we can do code attribution. So when we identify a vulnerability within the code production ecosystem, we're able to bring that back and look at it in a way that attributes that all the way down to the core developer. So it's not just what's vulnerable or how vulnerable it is. It's how did we get that vulnerability and what can we do to isolate it and make it better for and more secure for the entity.
Doug, 2 weeks ago, I interviewed a company, and we went into thorough detail on these subtle differences between data lakes and data warehouses. But we never used the word data leak. And so maybe you're the expert in data leaks here. So what is a data leak? Is it only in a data lake or what?
So you get data leakage, and it's kind of an awkward statement, right? I got data leak, which sounds like something I need to go to the doctor for. But in all seriousness, data leakage is typically when you have data dispersed across a very wide ecosystem, and you may not have that data in that regulatory or required data in the right place, and it's now spreading its way across the ecosystem. So you're essentially spreading or leaking that regulated data or that critical data across a broader ecosystem. And what we really don't want to have is that data leakage nobody ever wants data leakage. But more seriously, you don't want data leakage when it starts to leave the environment, because that's what ends up resulting in a breach. And I don't like talking about breaches. I will be I would be remiss to say that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So make sure you're prepared. But back to your data leakage, it's where you have data sprawl and it starts to that sensitive or confidential or restricted data starts to find its way into places that aren't as protected as others.
And I can see this happening. Complex hybrid cloud situations, constant improvement. All of a sudden, some dependency changes and it impacts 1 and 1 is 8. All of a sudden, a different color comes up, and who could have predicted it? But it happens, doesn't it? So if you're not constantly looking, you can be exposed.
It is something when you think about the way that the cloud has really transformed all our lives. Everything that we do, or a lot of stuff that we do today, resides on the cloud. As it relates to, again, the evolution of the cloud, we're now talking about hyperscalers and being able to adapt and expand and scale in real time. And when you look at that across an ecosystem, you're absolutely right, John, that data can go from one system to another system that may not be authorized to have that data very, very quickly without your knowledge or visibility. And one of the key things, again, getting back to the frictionless thing, is the ability to be able to look at that entire ecosystem and identify those issues before they happen or as quickly as you can after they've happened is just going to make your environment much cleaner, much safer, much more secure.
There's a concept called unified data, and I think that's one of the goals of your system is to try to present something in a unified manner so they can see exactly what's going on and see where the vulnerabilities are. Is that one of the strengths of your system?
So we talk, I've talked frictionless. We've spoken about, how cloud security is broken. One of the things that makes us unique and one of the things that you're talking about is a unified data model. So traditionally, again, security, you've got your vulnerability scanner, you've got your malware detection, you've got these other point solutions that are all cobbling up all these alerts. Well, that's great, but as a practitioner, what the heck do I need to do with those? How do I address them? Because of the way our technology works, we're essentially collecting all that data. We're putting it in a unified data model. What this does is this allows us to present those alerts and issues to the customer or to the practitioner in a way that says, this is more urgent for you to fix than this other thing because of this context, because we can see it's a web-facing device that has a common vulnerability on it that can expose shared SSH keys that is associated with an overly permissive credentials that's associated with an S3 bucket that has PII on it. Because we're able to see that, we take that and all that data, rather than it being 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, we put it in a unified data model so that we can present it in that way. And that's the power of how we're aggregating and collecting that data. It also, as I spoke earlier, it also gives us the ability to develop and create new business use cases that are going to be applicable to making people's lives in security easier and more secure.
Jeffrey Kratz from AWS tells me there's 450 partners at this conference. I mean, it says there's all kinds of people floating around here. And one of the partners is Snowflake. And I think a lot of your success has been partnering with Snowflake. Is that right?
Yes. We have a very deep partnership with Snowflake. It's been very, very beneficial. The things that we're doing, you talk about a unified data model. A lot of the information that we're keeping within, well, I wouldn't say keeping, but a lot of the information that we're evaluating and then presenting to the customer is not something that we store natively for, in perpetuity. So we've partnered with Snowflake to give our customers the ability to offload a lot of that data so that they can keep that data in a very secure place, but they can keep it as long as they want. They can then it's now referenceable, it's searchable. If there's an issue, they can go back and look and say, what happened when and how can I fix it or what was done to fix it.
Well, I have a friend named Claude who has limitless resources, a bank account full and all kinds of 6 cars in his garage. And but that's not everybody. And humans have limited resources, and agencies has limited resources, and so what you have to do is prioritize them. And so if we were to walk down the street and walk into a federal agency here in Washington, D.C., and you're going to meet with the CIO, how would you maybe prioritize some of these goals?
So when you say some of these goals, I would like to ask, which goals, which goals? There's a lot of goals. So maybe I'll take the first part of this, and then you can refine on the goals. Organizations have a number of goals. Am I compliant is probably one. 2 is how much am I spending, right? And how do I get control of my spending? 3 is how secure am I? Am I addressing my risks, right? So we can go down the proverbial goal path. I would say that in a lot of instances, what I'm hearing from goals from the CIOs, CISOs of the world, is really how can I get better faster with less? And so what we do at Orca is really help enable that practitioner to not have to look at those 47,812 vulnerabilities to determine which ones I have to fix right now, because if I don't, there's going to be an issue. We contextualize those. I'll bring back the unified data model. We contextualize those so that the practitioner can say, I'm going to focus on these 8 critical vulnerabilities because they present us the highest amount of risk because of these contributing factors. Maybe it's exposed to the internet. Maybe there's regulatory or compliance related data in that stream. We're able to, so now from a CIO, CISO perspective, I'm looking at it in a return, in a value perspective of my folks can now focus on the things that really matter rather than playing whack-a-mole with, I've got 47,812 vulnerabilities. The other goal that we see, or strategy that we see, is really a tool consolidation component. And what I mean by that is organizations are saying, how can you do more with less, or how can you do more with the same? And that's at the budgetary level. And at that budgetary level, there's a lot of tool overlap. And I'm not saying that you should get rid of all your tools and there's one ring to rule them all. But what I would say is that there is a goal and a strategy of how can I get the most out of my people and how can I get the most out of my tooling. So where can I consolidate tooling? Where do I have overlap? And how can I go about making sure that we're both covered, but I'm not getting inundated with either bills or alerts from multiple tools?
This morning I got up early, went to Twitter like any normal human would, and I looked at Orca's Twitter feed. And I noticed a phrase called Amazon Security Lake. I said, was this a data lake, or is this a lake house, or not this lake word again? So what's in this security lake in Amazon? Is it special to you or unique to Amazon? What is it anyway?
So that's, I like, it's deep, it's wide, it's dark. But in absolute seriousness, folks are becoming more familiar with the construct of a data lake. A security lake takes it to one more level down, maybe not one level down, but it's going to provide much more granular opportunities for you to store and have searchable all your security-related data. So if you think about it from a log perspective or a Snowflake perspective, you're talking about a boatload of data, and it's coming from my SIM, it's coming from my malware detection, it's coming from my Orca. There's a lot of different data that's coming in. Putting that data into the, specifically to your question, the Amazon security lake allows that data to be much more referenceable upon a common language that can be searched across multiple SIMs. So whether it's Splunk or Sumo, I don't want to be brand whatever, so if I left you off, I'm sorry. But it enables a platform so that security data is much more searchable. You can store it for longer at a better cost.
My first job out of college was an English teacher, and so I always look at English and phrases and structures and parallel structures. And when I had Salesforce in 15 years ago, they talked about software as a service. And all of a sudden, this set the stage for everything. Today, we have ransomware as a service. So people are taking this construction and doing all kinds of fun things with it. And a phrase I learned yesterday was a phrase, infrastructure as code. So they're switching everything around here. So what is infrastructure as code? Is that what your system does?
We're not infrastructure as code per se, right? Infrastructure code, if we go back, I talked a little bit about the evolution of the cloud. So rather than having to run a VM to run a container, infrastructure as code allows you to run those things rather than as individual instances, more as a living, breathing, moving thing. So you can think, I'm trying to think of a really good analogy, and I'm drawing a blank on it, but the point to infrastructure as code is you're not kind of like Orca, you're not stuck on a point solution. You actually can have something that's scalable, that's dependable, where you're not standing up specific point things to accomplish whatever your mission objective is.
So an agent is something that's on that point.
Correct.
And if you have 500,000 points, that's 500,000 agents you have. And so an agentless solution would be, we don't have to worry about that. We can control it through a different angle through this side scanning technique.
100%. So that's when you start to pair infrastructure as code and you start to pair some of these other things, you can see how traditional approaches to cloud security were broken, right? If I'm going to be standing up containers and tearing down containers in a very, very rapid fashion, hyperscaling, whatever you want to call it, making sure that I've got coverage over those pieces at any particular time becomes, another full FTE that has to chase these. Does everything have what it needs from a security coverage? That's where Orca is a little different. We're not sensitive to those things. We're going to look at them, at time. We're going to look at them both on the container side, whether they're run or they're stopped, what those registries and repositories are. So you don't have the burden or the friction, if you will, of doing I need to deploy an agent. I need to make sure I've got this VPC configured. We're taking all that data in. I'm going to bring it back to the unified data model. We're bringing it into unified data model to present these things. And again, this really starts to then help organizations and practitioners solve what matters most to them. And if we bring it to the agency side, right, and the government side, it's really all about that mission objectives, having to reduce that friction, reduce that overhead, reduce that operational challenge of deploying these things. With Orca, that's gone. You can really help meet your mission better.
When you walk around the trade shows, all kinds of new things. When I talk to people at Amazon, I find out that they're getting involved in the satellite industry with ground stations. I mean, 10 years ago, okay, Amazon's going to be involved in satellite ground stations. No way, John. That's going to be impossible. So when you're at the show and you walk around talking to people, what do you see that's kind of new that's maybe unexpected? I mean, the whole idea of emphasis in healthcare, I think that's interesting, is the Amazon's going in so many directions. There's no way to categorize it, is there?
So everybody's got a category for something, right? And I both say that, kind of truthfully and then tongue in cheek. There is now there's always been PaaS, which is platform as a service, but now there's ATO as a service. So the authority to operate as a service as part of a platform delivery. I think that's probably the newest thing that I've seen. And that's a delta from RSA to even now, is that they're talking about ATO as code, as ATO as a service. And to me, that I'm a legacy security guy. I've been doing this for nearly 20 years. That to me is a whole new construct that I do have to peel the onion on. But that to me is one of the new things that kind of was eye-opening to me, is that there are providers out there that have a fully authorized platform that you can go deploy your SaaS solution into or on, depending on how you look at it, where you can deploy your service, your code, your SaaS solution on, that actually then inherits that authority to operate to be able to work with a particular agency or industry. To me, that's absolutely fascinating as to how those components work. And what are the requirements to actually being able to leverage that? I'd be remiss to say, yes, I'm talking to a few of those after this conference to find out, is it something that Orca can leverage for our opportunities? Well,
look, I am happy with software as a service, and I'm real happy with ATO as a service, but I'm very, very sad with podcast as a service. I hope that never comes to fruition. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I would like to thank my guest, Doug Hudson, Vice President, Public Sector at Orca Security.
This is Jeff Kratz from AWS. Listen to episode 78 of the Federal Tech Podcast to learn more new developments on the public sector partner programs and how the channel is using cloud to reduce the cost for federal IT, governments, healthcare, education, nonprofits, and more.
Thanks for listening to the Federal Tech Podcast. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.